Okay, so anyways, thank you guys so much for allowing me to interview the awesome villain Dani from Escape This Podcast.
I hope we give you what you want.
Don't worry at all, because I know that a lot of your podcast, This Escapes, kind of just covered this kind of thing. So you don't have to worry at all about saying the wrong thing or anything like that. You guys just talking about puzzles the way you do is great. I know that Dani, you mostly design the puzzles, but Bill, we also want to hear your stance as well as a solver, because in EnigMarch,
solver and fixer. He fixes all of my puzzles when they don't work yet.
That's another thing. That's great, because I do know you do the playtest, so you do have a lot of experience with testing puzzles, seeing what works, what doesn't. And you even did make some of your own puzzles as well. So we would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Let me find the list of questions, and do feel free if you want to add anything. You don't have to answer the questions cut and dry. You can add whatever.
You don't need to worry about us.
This is a very distinct thing we will do. The first question may take 45 minutes.
Your job is to cut us off when we've been talking for too long, not to try and get us to talk longer.
Yes. All right. So first of all, who are you?
Well, we are Bill and Dani. I'm Bill. This is Dani.
That's me.
From Escape This Podcast. So we make escape rooms as audio-only games, and we have guests come on and play them, and we publish the games so people at home can play them, and we've been doing that for over 5 years, 5.5 years, maybe.
And moved into doing a similar sort of thing with murder mysteries as well, creating them and putting them out there to be solved.
Yeah, so we've solved this murder as well. And then various little bits and bobs here and there in the world.
We make stories that have a veneer of puzzle.
Yeah.
Nice. What is your favorite and maybe least favorite type of puzzle? Each of you can answer.
It's hard because I think puzzles are very context specific, right? Like, for example, we at the moment have been very, very into Sudokus, specifically like variant Sudoku. So ones that are not just the basic Sudoku rules, but they add all of here's a cage inside that must sum to this, and nothing that's a knight's move away can do this, and anything that touches something that is odd must have 5, it must be different by 5, and then plus this, and all these weird little rules, and we love them, right? We've been getting really into them. We've been into them for a while, but they are very good when you want to sit down and do a Sudoku. I know a lot of people look at Sudokus from an escape room perspective, because we're very much in the escape room world, and they'll think, oh, Sudokus are terrible, crosswords are terrible, because if they show up in the middle of an escape room, they're terrible generally, right? They just sort of feel very plonked down into middle of nowhere.
They're medium inappropriate.
Yeah, right.
For what we do with podcasting, a Sudoku would be horribly inappropriate as well, because so much of it is just sitting and staring in silence.
So I think like puzzles, they've just got to fit where you are, right? To be in the right mood. Like, we love a good Sudoku. We love a good cryptic crossword. I have a weird soft spot for Minesweeper. Anytime
it's great.
I'm editing an episode right now where we have like a little Minesweeper game to play in an escape room, and I actually don't hate it. I'm like, this is brilliant, and it's just set up as play some Minesweeper now. But also, like, I think the thing with puzzles that is really fun are ones where they're not so much like a set style, but they are using sort of puzzly elements in a kind of a narrative way, or in a way that makes sense, right? So I like when you can sort of build a puzzle from like concepts of puzzling. And I think puzzle hunts do this quite well sometimes, where often a puzzle hunt isn't like, what puzzle was that? You go, well, it was elements of these 6 different sort of archetypical puzzle types. I was like indexing things so that I could rearrange things, so that I could try and find a hidden connection, so that I could yada yada yada. Like, and I like that when they just, I think types of puzzles, it's more fun to like build a puzzle with all of your building blocks that are puzzles and try and stick them together.
I'm going to go with, I feel like, much more specific things for my favorite types. Again, it really is context dependent. Tomorrow I may give a completely different answer. In general, if we're talking anything that I would just say yes to right now as a puzzle, it's going to be the game Clue or Cluedo. Just because when you play that as an adult, you realize it is about having tiny bits of information and realizing exactly how much you get out of a tiny bit.
That sort of logic deduction, sort of extrapolation.
It's like maths. But it's so exciting to realize exactly how much you know and how quickly you can figure it out based on that. Like, I love being near the end of a Cluedo game and just being able to go, all right, they've said that it's Colonel Mustard in the dining room with the wrench. All right, well, that person's going to show them the wrench card. Yep, I know that's coming. And just being able to figure it all out based on the things that you've seen already. That's so much fun. When it comes to actual escape rooms, I think the two things that I'll go for, one that I usually say is anything that is mandatory teamwork. We've had all sorts of ones like where we have to move an object around, but the controls are in wildly different places. So each person controls a different direction, things like that. Wonderful fun. Just anything where it involves communication over a long distance, something that forces everyone to be part of it. The other one, just a much smaller one that I really love is, I don't know what to call it. Where have I seen this before puzzle, which is usually a huge thing in a lot of escape rooms where you just have something and maybe it's like a piece of paper that's got like a jagged edge or something. And you're just trying to say, wait, where have I seen a jagged edge before? Or I don't know, something like that.
It's just like trying to keep track of connections.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just given a map and all the map has on it is the X for what you're looking for and maybe a circle somewhere else. And you have to go, okay, what in this room could that circle represent?
Yeah. Like in sort of like an iconography kind of thing. It's just like what like shapes and connections. And we had a great one in a recent escape room that was just like we had a circle on a stick, and we're like, wait a minute, I think I've seen a picture somewhere of the phases of the moon. This circle on a stick could rotate like a moon. Let's go and connect those. I like that.
Yeah.
I'd also like to just put one little plug out there for the fact of the puzzle where I'm sure it has a name, but we named it independently, which is associated activation puzzles, which we got really into because they were in every Nancy Drew game, which is just, when you press this, it affects 4 different things. When you press the next one, it affects a few things plus the original thing that you pressed and all these like levers that connect to each other.
So you're trying to make all of these different dials say the letter A, but every time you press one to change it, it changes a few of them in different ways.
And they're dumb because we stopped trialing and erroring those and we just solved them through like simultaneous equations and math. We just wrote down what each one did and then stopped interacting. And that was a lot of fun to figure out how to crack an associated activation puzzle and then also name it.
The connection between puzzles and maths is just so exciting when you start to see it everywhere. And like when you realize, hey, yeah, maths isn't just that thing that is just for school, because maths is all about logic. It is all about finding these jumps and connections and patterns. And that's what puzzles are. That's what I get out of puzzles, at least.
Like I said, you're going to need to stop us. So what was question number 2? I think that was meant to be a list of 3 things, but we've talked for 10 minutes.
That was fine. That was great. Nice to hear all the different perspectives. And I recently, my brother was playing like a puzzle game with some of those puzzles that you were talking about, and like that activation thing you were talking about, like it can be annoying because like every time I do this, then this messes up. This is good, but it's like a Rubik's Cube where when you get one, and then you're like, yes, this is done. But then when you move it, then it's not done anymore. But that can be satisfying. So that is nice type.
I think it was nice for us because we found like a way to sort of, I think when we first encountered them, we were doing the same thing of just like trying one, trying another, and just going like, we can't get there. We can't. And so like the revelation for us, like that for us was a big moment of going, wait a minute. We know that our final thing needs to be like, this has to go up by 2, this one has to go up by 3, this one has to go up by 1, and those 2 have to stay the same in the final solution. So let's look at the maths of what each button does, and then we can just add and subtract until we get those totals.
This was a big moment of something that we discovered. This could be.
And so that we have like a personal satisfaction with it. And so now we look at them and it's like, get out a notebook and let's do some maths. And
it's
good fun.
Just as another one with personal satisfaction one, slide puzzles, because everyone hates slide puzzles. Nobody is good at slide puzzles. I deliberately went and I tried to learn how to do slide puzzles. So I'm not perfect at them, but I have just enough confidence that I am excited to see slide puzzles now.
Can we change the question to least favorite puzzles? Because I'd like to put slide puzzles. Slide puzzles, I hate them. No one's ever enjoyed a slide puzzle except for Dani now. She's the one human being.
You're saying the ones where like there's one empty square and then you have to
and you got to just move the squares to make the picture into the right shape, and they're impossible and everybody
I tried to practice them because it seems that it's a mandatory skill if you want to be on Survivor.
They love them on Survivor.
It can be frustrating, but I do remember as a young child loving those, and I don't think I don't think that I've done one recently, but
it's impressive to be a child who enjoys them because they're really hard.
Yes.
Least favorite puzzles. Generally, I'm gonna go with memory. Trying to store too much in my head at one time. There can be ones where a little bit of memory, especially in a group, isn't too bad. You can work out how to split it apart between people. That's not too bad, making it a teamwork one. But just an individual test your memory have always filled me with dread.
I reckon this is one of those things where I reckon there's a discussion to be had. Because you see these pop up in escape rooms. It's just like a Simon Says sort of thing. It's just remembering a sequence. I don't know if that's a puzzle.
This is true.
You know how to do it.
Substitute.
Everyone already knows the solution and how to do it. I mean, that's just a game.
Good point.
It's the same as what's the biggest puzzle? Well, it's hard to score a goal in soccer, so I'm going to say scoring a goal in soccer is a puzzle. No, it's not. It's just it's a tough thing to do. Everyone knows how to do a memory game where people are just bad at it. I don't even think it's a puzzle, and I don't think that's a negative comment. I just wouldn't call it a puzzle.
All right, the puzzles I don't like are the ones that aren't puzzles.
Yeah, the ones that people dress up like puzzles. I'll tell you what. Here, I'm gonna shock the world. You know what else isn't a puzzle? A jigsaw puzzle. I don't think a jigsaw puzzle is a puzzle. That's just a task. I love them. I have so much fun.
Is coming up with strategies for them a puzzle?
It's not. Who comes up with strategies for a
jigsaw puzzle?
Still not a puzzle, because you can come up with strategies for anything. If a jigsaw puzzle is only a puzzle if every single thing in the world is a puzzle. That's my hot take. You can all take from this interview.
Maybe everything is puzzles.
No, not either. Yeah, either everything's a puzzle, or jigsaw puzzles aren't puzzles. That's the takeaway from this interview. We can finish the recording.
Is learning a language a puzzle?
Again, only if everything's a puzzle.
Really?
I mean, learning languages, there is puzzle-like elements to it. Figuring out a language is puzzle-like. But again, that's just because everything's a puzzle. Is walking
I definitely felt like my linguistics assignments at university were a puzzle.
Would you say that your favorite puzzle is walking? It's a puzzle for babies. They have to figure that out.
And it takes
them a while. They loved it. I think, okay, everything's a puzzle. Jigsaw's you back on because everything's a puzzle. Next.
Very interesting take. But yeah, that's a good point though, that anything can be a puzzle if you look at it in a puzzly kind of way. So that can segue into, when did you start puzzle making? Because I do know you guys have the podcast, but I don't know how long you guys have been making puzzles. What do you consider puzzles?
What about you? I feel like my answer might stretch a little far back.
I don't know. I think as a kid, I don't think I ever made puzzles. I don't think I thought I enjoyed puzzles until we started this show. I don't think I would have thought of myself as a puzzly person. The closest I got as a kid is I did a lot of game design. Like I loved game design as a kid, and coming up with rule sets and balancing things and coming up with how to, like, I would just be like, oh, we got cards. Let's try. I don't need to learn how to play canasta. Let's just try and make our own game. And and there were games that kids made, right? Like, so they were terrible, most of them. I found a notebook that I had written in when I was like 10, of like trying to build out rules for an entire like strategy game. It was all what it was, and I looked at it, I was like, man, you're so bad at this, kid. But I don't think I thought about like being a puzzle person or trying to design puzzles at all until we'd already been doing the show.
I was very much in primary school. I was the mega high achieving child. High achieving sounds like I did work. I was one of those lucky ones who was just good at primary school. So years kindergarten to year 6, those were my jam. I was good at everything back then. And that included taking tests. I loved tests of all sorts. And we had things like special advanced classes, selective schools that you could go into, and you have to take tests to get into those. So I would just sit at home and do practice tests of those. And I loved it to the point where I started trying to write my own ones of those when I was maybe about 10 or so. And one of the tests that you had to do for the selective school, high school entrance one in year 7 was I think they just called it the general knowledge test. So it was one for maths, one for English, and one for general knowledge. And all of the general knowledge questions weren't so much knowledge. There was some vocabulary, but most of them were puzzles, patterns, being able to spot what comes next in here. What is the correct order of these things? If an imaginary language had these words in it, which word probably means this one? And I was obsessed with them. And so those were the ones that I started making on my own.
Mm.
So that was probably my first real one that I remember for that. I don't think I ever did do any game design stuff myself. That didn't occur to me, even though puzzly video games were absolutely my thing. And I have to shout out the game Blockman. Nobody has ever played Blockman but me, and I love it so much. And it was like my first big puzzle game. Oh, it's so good.
You know what I played as a kid on DOS? I can't even remember what it's called. It's like Heart something or other. You were a little dwarf. And you had to collect hearts, and it was like Blockman. We're going to talk about DOS games for a while. I'm going to DOS game Heartlight. Was it Heartlight? Yeah, Heartlight. You're a little creepy dwarf. Everyone at home, if you're listening to this part of the interview, Google Heartlight. Man, I loved Heartlight. Look at it. It's just a lot of like trying to collect. Danny played Heartlight. So you clear out grass. While trying to collect hearts, and so like there are big metal balls that will fall down if you dig out the hearts underneath them or dig out the grass underneath them. So you have to like collect all the hearts without letting the balls fall in. So every little heart you collect with its own mini puzzle. Man, Heartlight, what a great game! Everybody go to some kind of DOS emulator and get a copy of Heartlight. When did Heartlight come out?
I mean, it's got to be like 1980 or something.
91.
Oh, wow.
January 91. Everyone go and play Heartlight. What a great game.
Wild.
That was my first big puzzle game that I got obsessed with as a kid.
Huh. But yeah, then I had...
very interesting.
It's
I want to look it up.
Please do. Google Heartlight right now. You can see the creepy... Don't Google Blockman. Blockman's just Heartlight for losers.
It's nothing alike.
I want to look up Blockman too. They both sound very interesting.
But yeah, I want to say after that...
There's only two type of kids in the 90s. Heartlight kids and Blockman kids.
But yeah, through the later teenage years and things, it all just went down to, nope, now I am just story writing and trivia. It just went straight into the trivia thing, which kind of the opposite of puzzles in a lot of ways.
Mm. Oh, surely coming up with strategies for trivia is
absolutely.
Puzzle.
That's why I say kinda.
Gotcha.
There are definitely ways that you can puzzle into it.
Yeah. So yes, that all of those things, that's great to expound on the fact that, like you said earlier, anything can be a puzzle. Like when I was younger, we would make our own board games and card games too. And we would make different puzzles and stuff like that. And some of them were not good, but it's good to, just practice and do any kind of creative outlet. And it might come into something that's pretty cool and you can share with people. So
it is so funny just looking back on it and always thinking about that. Like, did I ever know that I would go into creating puzzles for a podcast? Well, obviously growing up, podcasts, not a thing. Puzzles. And I always go, no, that never occurred to me as a thing that I could do. But the more I look back, the more I go through my old childhood books, I'm finding puzzle books that I remember spending months and months reading the same puzzly books over and over again. And clearly it was a huge influence and I just didn't pay that much attention to it.
Yeah.
It's like a dormant inside and
Very
you didn't
much
know
so.
until like you discovered your superpower.
Yeah.
So where can people see your work or rather hear it?
So most of the stuff that we do, right, you can find as as a podcast, as Escape This Podcast. You can just Google it. It pops up. You can go to escapethispodcast.com and listen to it all there. And that's the majority of the stuff that we do. And like we said earlier, if you go to any of the episodes and you like the escape room that is being played, you can download all of the notes and the supplementary images and all the other stuff that lets you become the person who runs the game, and you can run it for your friends and run it for you, or you can download it, give it to a friend and say, run this for me. I want to play it. So that's like the easiest way to consume most of what we do. But there's a few other things that float around. We did a couple of...
We've been lucky enough to do some real world experiences. But,
still internet experiences.
Yeah, still digital experiences, things like we worked on a couple of online escape rooms for the Sydney Opera House, for instance. So they're floating around. Yeah,
you can Google the Sydney Opera House escape room and you'll get two of the ones that I say mostly Dani, designed for that. And they're in-browser games. You can go through and read the story and solve the little puzzles there. And I there's little bits in other places. I think for last year's EnigMarch, I did a couple of little puzzles for the first few days, which were fun, just trying out a couple of things. I'm not sure where they are. We have a Discord server as well. And so when we have extra, and again, if you go to Escape This Podcast, you can find the link to the Discord server there.
It was wonderful last EnigMarch. We were definitely late getting to it, but looking through as many of the puzzles as we could afterwards.
Yeah, because not only do we sometimes post things puzzle-wise in there, but a lot of the people who are fans of our show are puzzle enthusiasts and puzzle designers. And so a lot of people, there's a whole channel there of people sharing puzzles they make. And for EnigMarch, it blew up and everyone was sharing every puzzle they did every day. And I was going through and trying to do them all, and they were great. They were lots of fun. So there's a sort of a whole world there, but it's mostly centered through escapethispodcast.com and then linking through that to find our Discord and other places where we just put puzzles everywhere.
Nice. Why do you guys enjoy puzzle making and puzzle solving?
Why
makes me feel smart?
Yes, feeling smart is good.
I crave appreciation for being smart, and I need people to tell me that. So solving puzzles is usually a computer or another person or a piece of paper telling me that, and it's very validating.
Look, I think there is the enjoyment of solving a puzzle. I think is one of those things that is very human. Humans, we are innately built to enjoy the solving of puzzles. We
need to form connections and to have things make sense and have logic leaps, and our brains panic if things are random.
Yeah, and it's nice that when you do a puzzle, it is made to do that. Like, it is designed to satisfy that part of the human brain that finds patterns, tries to solve things, tries to work things out. It's just like an evolutionary part of us that has led us to be to make stuff, right? It's a very key human feature. So I think everybody enjoys solving puzzles, and I think it's one of those things that you think of puzzles as like a subculture, like a thing that some people do, and then you realize like everybody does puzzles, like, but not even everything is puzzles. Even just like, well, who's doing like crosswords? Oh, everybody. Like, there's a reason it has been one of the most popular games that has existed for the last like 150 years or whatever. Like, people have just been doing them. Think about like when Wordle happened. Wordle wasn't for puzzle people. Wordle is just a little puzzle. It was just the puzzle game mastermind mixed with Scrabble, right? And then you think, okay, well, who played Wordle? And the answer was everybody. And it's just like a good example of even people who aren't into puzzles. When it gets popular enough, humans love to do puzzles. And everybody got into Wordle because it was simple and understandable and fun. And people love to do that. And so it became a phenomenon because puzzles aren't really a subculture. Puzzles aren't really a thing that only certain type of people enjoy. It's people love solving puzzles. And sometimes people don't know it and they don't think they're doing puzzles. And then it's like, well, you're doing like a fantasy football league and you're calculating this, that, and the other, and who's going to, okay, cool. So you love puzzles. And so I think the solving of puzzles it's just something people like.
From what I've seen of what American football coaches do, American football is a puzzle.
Yeah. Nothing's more of a puzzle than gridiron. It's just them being like,
have you seen those diagrams?
Yeah. There's no bigger nerd than an American football coach. But no, like, and
they're some of like the most well-paid people in the world, aren't they?
Yeah. And so then in terms of like making puzzles, I think making puzzles is just something fun to be part of something on the inside. There's a little bit of like, oh, I could be on the other side of this.
It feels very collaborative to me. And you hear that sometimes people like create difficult puzzles and go, ha ha ha, you will never solve my puzzle.
Oh, yeah,
like Riddlers. The Riddler is wrong. Like, it is very much collaborative. I love being able to create something and have the other people be able to see how they manage to tick through it in their brains and be able to watch that process happen in other people. It's really entertaining. And if they are able to come out of it and go, I solved a thing and I feel good about it, I made that happen. Yeah.
And I think that's like the key thing to remember when you are making puzzles. Like the you want to make a puzzle that gets solved. Like making puzzles that are that is like super difficult and really hard. We've said this before on our show. It's so easy to make a puzzle that's really difficult. You just make a bad puzzle. Like the worse your puzzle is, the harder it is to solve. And so it's super easy to make really difficult puzzles. And so like it is that like creating an experience for someone and following along, being like, yeah. Oh, yes, you did it, is a really cool feeling. It's, I don't know, it's just nice. It's just nice to be part of that stuff. It's a little like show and tell-y. It's like, look what I've made, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's fun," and they all give it a go, and you see them have a fun time doing it. You're like, yes, nice, awesome. Like, and now you give me one. Now you come up with something fun. And that's why I think like EnigMarch is such a nice idea, because I think for some people there's like and I think this happened to me as well early on. There's like a barrier of like, well, I can't be the person who makes a puzzle. I just enjoy solving them. And I think EnigMarch just giving you like a little push to be like, hey, why don't you have a crack? Like, just have a crack. Like, no one's going to blame you. They know you've done it in a day. They know that you're not putting your, like, this isn't like an expression of who you are as a person, and any judgment of the puzzle is a judgment of you. It's like you're doing something fun for EnigMarch, and it makes you give it a crack and then just be like, okay, no, I can get this. I understand how to put this together. And it's fun. It's fun. It's nice and makes people friends.
It is. Like when we're not doing this, I also do tutoring of school kids, and in some ways you get a lot of that same feeling. You're getting people to go through and find connections that they didn't have before. It's nice, and I think it's a similar type of rewarding. I wonder how much connection there is between puzzly people and teachers.
I think there's a lot. I used to be a preschool teacher for 4 years, which is not the age group that you're in, but I do know that it can be
those are the people who have the most to still learn.
Exactly. It can be a challenge dealing with the kids, but like you said, it's rewarding to when they catch on to a lesson. It's like your purpose is to help them learn. It's not like I'm going to make an impossible equation that you will never be able to solve. Nobody's doing that. If they can't understand the lesson, it's like you kind of failed, because your mission is to help them to learn.
Exactly.
So if you make a puzzle that's just like Bill, you said, horrible, like anybody can just make I can make a vague puzzle like, what does this mean? It's like, well, what does it mean?
Yeah.
You'll never find out.
Like,
it's like, well,
it's
okay.
It's the classic bit from The Hobbit. Like, it's riddles, and then it's, what do I have in my pocket? Well, there's no answer to that. That's a bad riddle. And that's why he wins, because he asked a real bad riddle.
Exactly.
He does it accidentally, but still.
Funnily enough, I think that this was definitely a major problem that I would have had being a child and trying to create these questions and puzzles and things, because children absolutely have that. I've just recently introducing the idea of my students writing their own maths problems for the different categories, and the older ones perfectly fine. They're pretty comfortable with it. The younger ones go all out and try to make them ridiculous and unsolvable.
And I think kids also, like early on, there's like I think one of those fundamental parts of childhood development is understanding the difference between what you know and what other people know. Like, I think I still find that such a particular thing that young kids will do, where they'll talk to you and you've never, like, maybe you've seen them for the first time in a while, or, you see them and they'll be like, so Jake did this. And you're like, mate, I don't know who Jake is. Jake is not a universally, like, that is, the crazy this may seem, that is something that you know that I don't know, and you need to give me context. But the kid's like, well, no, other people know stuff, and then I know things, and like anything I know is just known stuff. So of course I don't need to describe who Jake is. You know Jake, he's Jake. It's like, I don't know Jake, kid. Like,
I totally understand what you're saying, because yes, as you're young, a lot of like, especially the really young ones, they think that since they know, like, it's a universal thing, like what they see is, there, and then they think everybody knows.
Like step of how could someone get to this knowledge is not a thing that kids ever have to think about.
Yeah, right. And I think it's also just like from a like when you say this, it always sounds like like you're saying something judgmental, but it's like a non-judgmental thing. It is fundamentally like a lack of empathy that we don't have when we're young. Yeah. Not empathy like, oh, I'm being mean.
It's not about feeling.
Literally, like not being able to have a concept of what somebody else's brain would be like compared to like to literally not have that empathy of knowing that they will see the world differently. And like when you're a kid, it's like to the extreme, that lack of empathy, as opposed to when you're a teenager, where it's just that you're a loser and nobody likes you because you have no empathy. But yeah, so it is. It's just interesting, and that I think is a good point. That is something that is required when you are writing puzzles. You need to know not just like stuff or things that you can do. You have to be aware of like, well, how could people know this? How could people learn this in the moment? What, like, if I give them A, B, C, how do they know it's going to be D next? Like, what's going on? How do I make sure that is unambiguous, not just something I would know? And so I think that's like a skill that you get when you do. I think puzzles make you a better person. They make you more empathetic.
Yeah.
But it's a key part of puzzle making. I think that's one of the first things that people can struggle with is they go, well, like, and you see this sometimes in like puzzle hunts as well, where people like, they would see that, this thing is colored blue and this thing is colored red. So obviously they'd then think about a boxing ring where there's a red corner and a blue corner. So they're going to start looking at lists of famous boxers. You go, whoa. There are
Who would do that?
Things, man. Why did you assume? But like, and they'll do this. You see these logic jumps. Like,
I know.
Clearly that's a boxing ring because red and blue only in my mind exist as part of a boxing ring. And so, like getting to understand those jumps and connections and how to make those clear. And also accepting like what's, you see this more in international stuff, like what's culturally relevant. Sometimes you'd be like,
oh yeah,
they'll be like, oh, this is a puzzle from Japan, and we talked about there being lightning, there being thunder, so obviously you're going to think about gates. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, like the gate guardians of lightning and like, what are you talking about? Gates? Like, yeah, of course you would. Why wouldn't you think about gates?
Yeah, even just the super minor one that we had in America, where we had just little squares or whatever that each had a little picture on them, and we were supposed to order them representing the months. And one of them was what I thought was a top hat. And no, it was a pilgrim's hat.
So
because it was
November. So it was we were just like, oh no, man, tell us about it.
He's struggling enough with like, okay, snowmen. Wait, hold on. Hold on. December, January. Okay.
Yeah, and so like these things that are like cultural imagery placed on these to be like. And now we're not going to put words down. We'll just put these images that everybody's going to know.
Always more to learn. You can even do this like with rebuses, with your different accent affecting rebuses were.
So common. Accents in rebus, things that rhyme in American English that do not rhyme in Australian English, things that are the same vowel sound.
Where their vowels are slightly different.
Yes, some UK stuff, right? People just like, they have their own accent. And and of course you can do it that way. Like it's perfectly reasonable to do it that way. It's
one of these things that being part of the international community.
Yeah, it's just funny to be aware. Yeah.
Yeah, because like I said, my brother was playing some puzzle games, and I was like, this must be from the UK or something, because one of the things I kept trying to say, like one of those, like it was a name, like, Hugh G whatever, and then I was like, well, what does that mean? And I couldn't say it. I was like, maybe I have to say it in a different accent. It wasn't making sense.
It makes such a difference. That is like my first step when we see puzzles online that require pronunciation. I say it and I go, that doesn't work, and then I go, wait a minute, let me like put on a weird like West Coast US accent. Oh, okay, now it sort of works. And it just happens a lot.
Yeah. So that does segue into how do you go about the puzzle making process? We talked a little bit about you have to be a little bit empathetic and know that outside knowledge may not, like your knowledge might not be somebody else's knowledge.
Which is hard because it's also interesting doing the same thing, because I do a lot of trivia writing as well, and you still have to do the same level of balance with trivia writing, and bad trivia writers are bad at that. They just take a thing that they know and assume it's a good trivia question. But no, you have to work really hard at that, and that's very challenging to know what is appropriate for that. For the puzzle design, I tend to always say this. I don't feel like a puzzle designy person, which is crazy because that is a lot of what I do. I feel like a story creating person. So the majority of the puzzles that I have to create are within the confines of a story, a setting, and what makes sense in there. And so that is always the starting point. If I am asked to do a scavenger hunt, a puzzle hunt style puzzle or anything, I will definitely give it a good go. I always feel I'm out of my element with those. Starting with the puzzle, it always freaks me out a little bit because it's true, I don't know what is appropriate, and that requires a lot more very strenuous thought and balancing and figuring out how these things all fit together and how people can figure out the pieces. But when you've wrapped it in a story and a narrative, it becomes a lot easier to control the knowledge flow and the direction that their thoughts are going to head.
Do you find, I'm asking you a question.
Ooh, okay.
I'm putting a mini interview in our answer to this interview.
Sure.
I would say that when coming up with a puzzle, generally it's like either one of two things. You either have a message that you want to deliver and you are back forming a puzzle that could give you that message, right? You think, oh, I want it to say like, think in capital letters. So, okay, well, that's 5 letters, THINK, or maybe, right? And that's like or I feel like the other way is you have a shtick of a puzzle. You're like, ooh, I'd love a puzzle where it's like, you have to take the middles of each of words and they will come together to make new words, and then the leftover outsides are a whole set. Okay, that's a cool concept. What could I get this to say? Do you find you're usually harder? Do you think you're usually doing the former rather than the latter? Are you usually coming up with a final thing that you want and then backforming the puzzle to get it?
Okay, sort of a weird mix. It's usually like if there is a word that I want at the end, I won't know what the word is, but I will know, okay, I know where I need the players to end up, where the puzzle solvers need to be. And I then come up with what is in their way, and not exactly like what puzzle is in their way, almost like what object physically is in their way. And then I look at that object and I will go, all right, what is this object? What can puzzle out of this object? Like if it's a clock, you've got moving hands, you've got numbers, you've got alarms, and just trying to pick a puzzle that works out of those that fits for how I've got this clock blocking whatever they need.
And I think that's partially like the way because when you start your escape rooms, you always build out the room first so you know what's in it. And then later on you put the puzzles in.
Yeah, I also put the loose narrative in there. Whenever it comes to novel writing, I am always extremely firmly in the camp of know your ending. Even if you're the sort of person who doesn't do the full-on planning, structuring out everything process, going chapter by chapter and knowing what exactly is going to be said, know where you want to end up is so important for me. And so, yeah, the puzzles are always the last thing that I design because they're always in service of the narrative.
Do you think that probably helps, like from a puzzle perspective, right? Like it can be hard to start with a blank piece of paper and be like, okay, I need a puzzle. But for you, like you've already got sort of constraints, and then constraints can breed creativity, right? Because you're not thinking of what's a puzzle. You're like, well, how could a chair be? Like, how could I hide a puzzle inside a chair? And what have I got? 4 legs, I've got a base, I've got a back, or maybe it folds. Okay, those are the elements I've got. How could they be a puzzle hidden in there?
And this is what I really liked about EnigMarch specifically, because there were prompts. It was a daily prompt thing. And from that prompt, that constraint alone can be enough, because it immediately, even if it's just a single word, if it's the word chair, that can put different people's minds in a million different directions, but it always puts your brain somewhere. It artificially limits you to a certain area, and now you have to create a puzzle out of that. And yes, 100%, I'm very much on the constraints thing. If someone is commissioning me to write a private room, I always say, tell me what you want. Look, I can make up plenty of stuff, but if you have a theme, if you have any puzzle types you want, any characters you want, the more you have, the easier this will be.
I think it does help. I think maybe this is not true for everybody. I think that kind of like constraint helps breed creativity. And I think if you are trying to come up with a puzzle, like if you're at home right now listening to this and thinking, I want to make a puzzle. Oh, I need a puzzle for myself because you're a little baby. I want a puzzle. I think that's a good first step is come up with something specific and constraining first, and then go, okay, how do I turn that into a puzzle? Rather than think, I want to start from scratch and make the puzzle. just like look around your room and be like, oh, okay, here's a mug. I've got a mug sitting next to me. How do I turn a mug into a puzzle? You go, okay, well, I got a mug. Mugs, they've got designs on them. Look at this. I have a design on my mug. Oh, they've got often like rims. Maybe you would have like writing around the rim. Oh, you could almost have writing around the rim of a mug that relates to the picture underneath it. Oh, but then like you could have people have used the mug. So maybe there's like lipstick here that covers up part of the writing, and the puzzle is figuring out what's been covered up by lipstick or by tea stains or, you know, something like that. Look, this is all off the top of my head, but already, right, you're starting to get the feeling of like, okay, there's a puzzle there. Or maybe what else do mugs do? They have a ring at the bottom. They leave mug stains on tables. All right, great. That's an idea for a puzzle. I've got a table. There are like full or half mug ring stains on the table.
They have had
maybe they highlight stuff. Yeah, or they're different colors for the drinks, and then you find out, wait, one of them was a cold drink, or like it was water. That's not going to leave the same sort of stain. And then you can so already like we're coming up with puzzles on the fly during this question answering because we picked up an object and went, oh, okay, look at that.
You know, it's really funny.
Now that I now want to write a mug puzzle, I've got like 3 mug puzzle ideas. Stop the interview. I'm going to make a mug puzzle.
When I'm tutoring kids and we're doing creative writing, in particular, if I want them to write something horror themed or come up with an idea, that is what I do. That is what a lot of like classic short story horror is. It is something that you wouldn't normally think would be scary, just a random object in your room. Make it scary.
Then the backpack had big, scary teeth. Oh, tooth backpack.
I mean, yeah, there are all sorts of things. You got a backpack. There are ways to make a backpack scary. And it's great. And again, I don't think kids are necessarily as good at this. Like the time I think
the big takeaway from this interview that kids are dumb.
I think for one of my students who went, okay, pillow. And I went, yes, a pillow. How can a pillow be scary? And I don't know. What are your thoughts for pillow scary?
I just picture someone smothering someone with a pillow.
Honestly, that's what I imagined also.
Right? No. This pillow was a pillow that aliens wanted, so aliens came.
Oh no, aliens! Don't take my pillow.
It's just very different.
Wow.
Not really how I planned it.
But yeah.
What about a pillow? And like instead of like it's full of feathers, but then like the feathers are like sharp. But you have to, but then you find out there's something in the pillow. You're like reaching into this is not even scary, it's just gruesome. You're trying to get to the bottom of the pillow.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that
this
happened
is a
in one of the
Saw pillow.
movies.
Back to the mugs. Mugs are better than pillows.
Yeah,
like
but that's
a microphone. Microphone can be scary. What if it starts talking on its own?
Oh no.
Also, if you're making that mug puzzle, please call it Mug Shot, and I'll enjoy it. It'll be great. Okay.
Great idea.
Hey, who's doing the EnigMarch prompts? Put mug as prompt number 1.
That's a good idea. Maybe. I don't know. But yes, that would be great. And Bill would love to see the mug puzzles if you have them. Feel free to share those.
Puzzle.
It would be great to have a real mug that had puzzles on it. So while you're drinking your tea or coffee, you can solve.
People have gone into the making puzzly props.
That's a merch
industry.
thing.
So I reckon that's out there.
Let's make a mug puzzle.
Yeah, now we have to know how to put puzzles on a mug.
Redbubble. You just get an image that makes it a puzzle, stick it on a mug, and send it out.
But then why make it a mug instead of just a piece of paper?
Because the puzzle is mug specific. It's not a mug with a puzzle on it. It's a mug with a mug puzzle on it.
Fine.
It's just cool novelty, and then when you're drinking out of it, someone will say, "What's that? Wait, what's that mug?" And you're like, "Well, yeah,
it's a puzzle. Look at this. It's a puzzle."
How much do you incorporate those heat-sensitive images?
Oh yes, that would be great.
Good. Puzzle mugs.
All right, fine. Puzzle mugs.
Yes.
All right, we're gonna start a line of puzzle mugs. Oh, that's a business. Damn it! Now we're gonna start a puzzle mug business. Bloody hell.
Well, something to think about. But yeah, you kind of already did give some advice for new puzzle makers who maybe, did you want to elaborate more, or do you think you already covered that?
Well, yeah. So the point we made earlier was give yourself a constraint, work from an object or an idea rather than trying to come up with one that like suits it. But like, don't come up with a puzzle first. I think come up with a constraint first and then start puzzling.
Look at any movies that have puzzles in them. Like I want to say Temple of Doom. That's all puzzly at the end of that. And see, because the only reason those work as puzzles is based on the context of the rest of the movie. So yeah, giving yourself some sort of, it doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out narrative or anything like that. But yeah, a little scene setting or just a little inspiration constraint that you have to go with. Something like that will definitely make it easier.
And I think there's also the same advice that you give to people who want to like write, right? Like the first thing you want to do if you want to be good at writing is read, right? Read more and you'll get better at writing because you'll figure out how people write and what good writing looks like. If you want to do more puzzles or if you want to write puzzles, do some puzzles. But while you're doing it, especially like keep a part of your brain on what type of puzzle is this? Like what's going on? And then you start to learn like the building blocks that can make puzzles. You start to be like, oh, yep. You can like put in like ciphers are a thing, but also like figuring them out is done in this sort of way. And indexing is a thing, or pictures that look like this, and you start to build. And
much like with writing and the hero's journey, you don't have to say, I am going to use these building blocks for this puzzle. They will probably just naturally happen as you build a puzzle.
Yeah, but it's so it's do more puzzles, give yourself a constraint, and I don't know, send us $200 and we'll give you a private course.
Again,
puzzle making.
I still don't feel like a puzzle designer, so this is very questionable.
But first rule of puzzles is don't send us $200. You failed by sending us the money. We keep the money and you learn a life lesson.
I'll take it.
Well, do you have any tips for seasoned puzzle makers who have been making puzzles for a long time, or would it be the same exact advice?
They probably know a lot better.
Yeah, if you're a seasoned puzzle maker, you don't need tips from us. One thing I would say, if you're a seasoned puzzle maker, focus on narrative. Like if that's something that you're not working on, right? If all your puzzles exist in their own little worlds, try and as an exercise, like stick them together with a story and see how that then affects the puzzle, right? We one of the things that people in escape rooms in the escape room industry like to talk about is narrative versus puzzles and how to do this. And often when it's done poorly, you can have a room that has good narrative and good puzzles, but even if the puzzles fit the narrative or they fit the theme, they're not being used to convey narrative or convey character. So I reckon if you're a seasoned puzzle designer and you want to give yourself a challenge, come up with a puzzle that you can solve that also tells you more about the situation that puzzle is in, right? Not just by the answer to the puzzle being that solution, but like the method that you use to solve the puzzle tells you more about the character who's behind the puzzle, right? You know, or it's a hard line to do, but you know, it's like the things that you need to interact with, the manner in which you're using them is like, oh, of course they would do it this way because they loved to eat pies and that's why it's a pie, and now I find out more, oh, that's how this happened, and now that, right, like it's a weird sort of challenge, but try and like, I reckon that's a fun thing to set yourself, is a puzzle that inherently through the doing of the puzzle, not getting the answer, but the process of doing the puzzle lets you know more about a character or an event or a story. It's difficult, but it's cool, and it's a great skill to have.
One other thing that I reckon is a good one to play around with, and I don't do this, is play with different difficulty levels for the same puzzle.
Ooh,
like
yeah.
Create one puzzle, create it at what you think is an easy difficulty, and then see what gets adjusted to turn it into a medium difficulty and what gets further adjusted to make it a hard difficulty. Like, I have no idea just by looking at a Sudoku whether it's going to be easy, medium, or hard. But apparently the people who design Sudokus are amazing and they know these things. And I want to know what these differences are. And in lots of different puzzles, you can see that. Like the Nancy Drew games have an easy mode and a hard mode. And it's very interesting to see some of them, what choices they make. Sometimes they're bad choices. Sometimes they're great choices.
It is funny. And sometimes when you play it on hard, which we do and did when we were playing through all the Nancy Drews, you get more of a feeling of like, oh, okay, this was designed the easy way, and then they made it worse to make it harder.
Yeah.
They just like took out key information to make us have a harder time.
So apparently finding this balance is quite a skill.
I think that's a good skill to work on as well.
That's great advice to seasoned puzzle makers. And I do know you guys
send us $200.
Okay.
Along those same lines are coming up, if it's appropriate for whatever puzzles you're doing, how you do your hint system fits in very much with the difficulty levels, because creating appropriate hints that don't just that don't not help whatsoever, but also don't feel like the person loses their accomplishment.
Oh, the amount of hint systems that we've seen where we're stuck somewhere in a puzzle and the hints are hint number 1, it's a puzzle. Like, yeah, I knew. Hint number 2, have you thought about the fact that it's a puzzle? Yeah, I know. Hint number 3, here's the solution. Like, there should have been something in between that helped me out partway through. Not 2 really obvious statements and then the solution. Sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, but that's a good point. There is a balance between how you want to make your puzzle challenging enough to be satisfying when it's solved. You don't want to make it too challenging where people get frustrated and just leave it alone.
And again, this is just like teaching. Like, we know the answers to these questions. It's really easy for us to explain the answer to you, but to make you have the initiative and the whatever the word is, to actually get there yourself, it's a balancing act. It's really tempting sometimes to just say the answer or to show how cool you are because you do know how to do it.
Exactly.
Hey kid, watch me do calculus for an hour. I'm so cool.
I would love to just let my students watch me do calculus for an hour, but that's not how this works.
Exactly. Well, you guys gave some really nice advice. I know you guys do have to go soon. So I just have one more question would be, what would you say to a person who doesn't think they can make a puzzle of their own? But I do know you did say something about this earlier.
I mean, do EnigMarch. Give it a crack. I think EnigMarch is exactly for you, right? Like, you need something to just... I think first thing is EnigMarch, because it is daily stuff, right? It's a new prompt every day. It means you sacrifice any concept of like perfectionist element to it. You can't keep working on it for just set yourself like, I'm going to write a puzzle and I'll be done by the end of the day, or I'll be done. Maybe give yourself 2 days, right? If it's, starting off like, next 2 days, I'm going to write this puzzle. And when it's done, just like, all right, it's done, and make some real bad puzzles. I reckon that's good advice. Anyone who's starting something new, if you're new to making puzzles, make a really bad puzzle. Just do it. Just like make it and have it out there.
It could be make a really bad puzzle. I think my advice would be make a puzzle that already exists. Like, make someone else's puzzle, and then you can figure out what adjustments you would make to it.
Oh, that's cool. That's nice advice. I like that.
I always love that. Again, I just bring it back to all the other topics, is what I did with writing. Just take a paragraph of a book that I like, I just type it out.
Oh, how funny.
And it just made me feel good to have those words and to like have typed those words myself. And it suddenly made me feel like I could change them and put that sort of thing and figure out these structures and what makes sentences good in my own stories.
That's really interesting.
I reckon puzzles would be very similar.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Make an existent puzzle and then make your own.
Just legitimately find a puzzle that you like, copy it exactly, but like change what the answer is and see how that affects the question and the difficulty and stuff like that. And it will hopefully spiral from there. And of course, if you don't think you can make a puzzle because you don't like making puzzles, you also don't have to.
Yeah, that's our advice.
If you want to.
I know the people who don't want to make a puzzle is don't. It's fine. You don't have to. It's not a requirement. You can just not make a puzzle. But I don't think those people are looking for our advice.
If you enjoy doing puzzles, you are not obligated to create puzzles yourself. Like, it's fine. People enjoy making puzzles enough that you don't have to force yourself.
But yeah, don't feel like you can't, because you can. If you enjoy a puzzle, you can make one. It's, I don't know, it's easier than you think. I think sometimes.
Because everything is puzzles.
Because everything's a puzzle. But yeah, I don't know, give it a crack. Just give it a crack and do a bad job. And then do a good job eventually.
What is like one of your favorite kinds of puzzles to make, or your favorite puzzle that you've ever made?
This is really hard. It's really hard. I've done a little bit of thinking about it, and I think this is a very broad category of puzzle, and it's incredibly difficult to design, though not as hard in effect as I expected. Ones where it is just right in front of you, but usually the person needs just a little bit of information to actually see what is right in front of them. It's one of those ones where it's a picture, and there is just a word written across the picture, but until you are told, only pay attention to the red lines, you can't see it. Yeah. And then as soon as you can't get rid of it.
Yeah,
I love it. And you never know how obvious it is when you're making those puzzles. Until it gets to playtesting, you can never tell.
Those are always your most nervous playtests, because you'll be like, here's a puzzle. Just I hope you don't see it straight away. I'll look at it. I have no idea what you're talking about. This is ridiculous. Yeah, and you've done a few of those.
It's like the ones where it's written down and you say it out loud and that's the answer. But you can't tell even as you are saying the words out loud, just because of the way you've seen them on paper. You can't make the connection that you are saying real words, things like that. It's great. It's so much fun when it works.
That's lovely. And yeah, I don't know. I think just because we come from an escape room sort of puzzle making background, I think the one that's sort of underrated sometimes is the type of puzzle that also works in like a tabletop role-playing game or really in a lot of computer games when they build puzzles, a lot of like adventure up, like a Zelda style puzzle, which is almost like you're not really solving, you're not sitting and doing a solve. You're collecting bits along the way, and then it's finding the use. I think my favorite things are when you've been holding an object for a while and you go, wait a minute. Finally, I can use the wrench. This is a wrench-shaped thing that I can wrench, and I like these. It's like environmental puzzles of like connecting physical objects or locations or figuring out that you can get from here to here, stacking things up and be like, oh, I needed 3 things that were about 1 meter tall and I found them all, so I can dunk. And they're sort of somewhere between a task and a puzzle, but I think they work really well. And I think they're sometimes overlooked in terms of how much fun and how smart you feel when you solve them and how simple they are to make. You just like, you leave like literally the most bare bones form of it is just the idea of you've got like an unlit torch in one room and a box of matches in another room. And that's not a puzzle, but it is. When you're playing a game, it feels like a puzzle. You walk in the room, you're like, matches? Oh my God, we had an unlit torch. Quickly, light the torch with the matches. Oh, I'm so smart. And it's like, you're not smart. You lit a torch with matches. That's what anybody would do, but you feel smart. Yeah. It's great. And I think those are really easy to implement and really fun and really give people a sense of being in a world and being in a space. And they can get complicated. And they can get to the point of being proper, like puzzle things. Like, wait a minute, if this goes with this and I'm connecting this and, and I should move those and I got to do it in the right order. So I got to light this, then move that because this, and they become like a Rube Goldberg machine where, it's like, I do this, which sets off that. So that has to catch into here and then that. But I really like that as a type of puzzle.
Rube Goldberg-y.
Yeah, that Rube Goldberg style of building and connecting anything from as simple as lighting something on fire with matches to something super complicated. I think they can work out really well as long as it's clear what the rules are for every object. There's a famously, at least for us, difficult Rube Goldberg machine in a Nancy Drew game because there's no way of figuring out what any object is going to do until you trial it in order, and you just can't figure it out. So that's part of the skill, is making sure people know the rules. Like, this thing knocks things in front of it down. That's all it does every time. That's how it works. That. Lock that in. Now to figure out how it works with everything else. I just think they're fun. I think they're nice to do.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much once again for allowing me to interview you guys. And I appreciate all the very helpful advice and all of the, chatting and awesome
the rambling about nothing. Yep.
Yeah, but it's really good. I believe that will be a great addition to the EnigMarch. Folks, if you guys are out there and you are wondering about EnigMarch, you can join as a puzzle maker or a puzzle solver. Like Bill said, if you don't want to make puzzles, you don't have to. You can solve them because several people are making them for EnigMarch. So you will not have a shortage. All right. So thank you guys so much once again.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And you already let us know where we can find you, and we will make sure to link those things in the interview.
Oh, and you know what I will say, if you want to enjoy EnigMarch, you want to have fun, do check out the Escape This podcast or the Consume This Media Discord. I think we can claim that EnigMarch was born in the Escape This podcast Discord. And so check it out. That's where a lot of people are talking about it and having fun and making the puzzles and sharing them.
People there.
You can go to the birth of EnigMarch and see it at its rawest and most pure form.
It was getting weird.
Oh, well, yes, thank you. Please join the Discord, everybody. And have a blessed one. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us talk for so long.
All
No
right.
one ever lets us talk.
Oh. All right. We thank you so much for tuning in to these EnigMarch interviews. It was such a blast talking to all the puzzly people in the community. From Errol Lumiere to Brett Keener, and the founder of EnigMarch herself, Sarah Wilson. Be sure to check out these interviews as well. I'm so excited for EnigMarch. Are you? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching!